bonsoir à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue à cette nouvelle conférence du cycle Peuple Région Elites, cycle de conférence organisé par l'Observatoire de la vie politique régionale. Ce soir, nous avons le grand plaisir même, d'accueillir le professeur Oscar Barberà. Oscar Barberà qui est prof associé, à l'Université de Valencia. Il est titulaire d'un doctorat en sciences politiques de l'Université autonome de Barcelone en 2006. Sa thèse de doctorat a été primée en 2007 par l'Association espagnole de sciences politiques et des sciences administratives. Et depuis donc, déjà pendant sa thèse de doctorat et après sa thèse de doctorat, Oscar Barberà a quand même mené aussi une riche activité de recherche et de visiting aussi dans plusieurs universités, comme vous pouvez le voir, en partant de la Belgique, en passant par l'Angleterre, l'Italie, l'Écosse et depuis quelques mois, depuis le mois d'août, nous avons le plaisir aussi de l'avoir comme chercheur invité à l'Université de Lausanne. Oscar Barberà qui travaille notamment sur les partis et la mobilisation régionaliste en Espagne, d'une part, et d'autre part, de manière même plus générale, sur les élites politiques et les processus de décentralisation dans une perspective comparée. Et à ce propos, voici, c'est vraiment, il y a quand même une liste bien riche de publications. J'ai sorti les toutes dernières, dont une aussi, un chapitre d'un ouvrage collectif co-dirigé par Oscar Madeleini sur les partis régionalistes. Oscar, avec sa collègue Astrid Barrio, a notamment rédigé un chapitre sur le cas espagnol. Je lui laisse très volontiers donc, la parole pour maximum des 40-45 minutes. Après, ça sera le tour de Maxime Bottel, que je remercie aussi, qui va officier en tant que discutant. Maxime Bottel, qui est assistant diplômé doctorant de l'Observatoire de la vie politique régionale, au sein de notre institut d'études politiques historiques internationales de l'UNIL de Lausanne. Merci aussi Maxime. Tu auras après, donc, comme convenu, une dizaine de minutes pour un petit peu lancer la discussion. Donc voilà, je vais tout de suite céder la parole à Oscar. Ah voilà, magnifique, ça a l'air de jouer. Voilà, great.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your kind words. It's really a pleasure being here because we share so many interests in research. And I think my stay, not just the presentation, is a very good opportunity to enhance the relationship that started some months ago with Oscar and with the whole university here in Lausanne. So what I will be presenting today is a paper that we are trying to submit to publication to a journal. And it's a co-authored paper with a colleague of mine, also from the University of Valencia, Astrid Barrio. And its main theme is the institutionalization process of Podemos and Ciudadanos. Both are two new parties that emerged recently in Spain. And that's a brief summary of the paper and also of my presentation. I will follow the paper, the main argument of the paper with my presentation. So basically, I will introduce the main question, then the theoretical framework. We will have a short look at both parties' origins, and then move to the main part of the paper that is focused on the institutionalization process and the main dimensions of the institutionalization process, and then discuss a bit the results and conclude. So the main question of the paper is about new parties and the way that new parties institutionalize in multi-level settings. And there's a lot of literature on new parties, there's a lot of growing literature, I would say, on institutionalization, and there's also as well a lot of literature on multi-level or territorial party politics. The thing is that these three literatures doesn't always relate to each other. So the question of the paper and the main point of our paper is trying to mix at least two main literature, two main research avenues. The first one is the literature on the origin of political parties. The main question of this literature is basically the influence of the origins on the evolution of political parties in the long term. So basically what this literature explores is path dependency. The findings of this literature since the seminal works of Observatoire and even Panebianco in the 80s are that indeed the origins of political parties shape their development in the long term, so the institutionalization process is really shaped by the origins. The thing with this literature is that this, as far as I know, is mainly based at the national level. So the origins of political parties has been studied mostly at the national level, and I would even say so that even in unitary states, not in federal states or decentralized states. So there's a gap in this literature how the origin of parties is affected to some way by the I would say multi-layered nature of political settings. And then we have another stream of literature that is basically the opposite, is based on the influence of decentralization, the literature on territorial party politics, that basically poses the question how mainstream parties, adapt to newly developing multi-level settings. So this literature, what mainly has found is that there are the decentralization process really shapes the evolution of political parties, especially mainstream parties, and it also provokes tensions and even divergences in the trajectories of these parties, especially in the different layers of the political system. The problem with this literature is that as the territorial party politics has focused on devolution, has not properly focused on the origins of parties. So this literature has been mainly applied to mainstream parties already existing when the devolution process starts. So we have two literatures looking at interesting things, but not really or not properly dialoguing between them. The thing that we are trying to do with this paper is trying to mix them both to find a common ground and to ask the question to what extent the multi-layered nature of a political setting really can influence the development of new parties, or as you may read, the institutionalization process of new parties. This could be developed in many ways, but I think that at least we can find two ways in which the multi-layered nature of a political system can influence the evolution of new parties. The first one is that at least two different pieces of evolution could be found. maybe the central level develops the process of institutionalization of the party on the party central office goes faster than what happens in the regions. So that would be this first situation. Maybe it's the contrary. Maybe a region develops, because of some particularities, develops its institutionalization process faster than what's happening in the center, in the central office. And we can also think of an opposite case, which would be more challenging for the political party. That would be maybe in some regions the process of the institutionalization goes forward in a way, and in other regions there's no institutionalization process but a process of de-institutionalization, so it goes through the other way. So we think that this could be a result of the process of institutionalization of new political parties in multi-layer system. Why do we think so? Because the electoral success of the same political party at the national and the regional level is different. For example, a party fares well in the national election, but thus has problems in terms of winning seats, for example, in a particular region or in other particular regions. So, maybe a party enters government in a region and not in another one. So that really is quite feasible and really poses questions about the future development of the party in different layers. Or maybe there's a conflict in one level, but there's internal conflicts, but there's no conflicts in another one, and that really affects the development of the party in different layers. Our main expectation, our main hypothesis is that if that is the case, the institutionalization would really improve faster in the party central office than at the regional one. Why so? What are the rationales underpinning this hypothesis? Because we think that even in highly decentralized parties or parties grown from bottom up, the main priority of the party central office would be to develop at least some kind of coordination office, and then this would feasibly improve the development of the party at the center and not at the periphery. So that's what our main hypothesis, and that's the rationale for that. To analyze the process of institutionalization of political parties, this is a quite new literature or research avenue. There's still some debate about what are the main dimensions or what are the main relevant dimensions of the process of the institutionalization of political parties. But there's at least there's a common ground regarding Randall and Svassan article on party politics in 2002, that they mainly point out four main dimensions of this process. That's the table from the party politics article of Randall and Svassan, that they try to differentiate between internal and external dimension of the political party, and between structural and attitudinal dimensions of the evolution. And from this distinction, they derive four main dimensions of the party's institutionalization process. And what we will try to do in the empirical part of the paper is to assess whether there's differences between within each dimension between the national and the regional level for these two parties, so for Podemos and for Ciudadanos. Why Podemos and Ciudadanos? Basically, what we're trying to do is, what we are stating is that at least the literature on territorial party politics has focused at Spain as a paradigmatic case. Most of the literature on territorial party politics is or has Spain as a paradigmatic case of the impact of the evolution on political parties. So what we are saying is, if that is the case, then probably we could you can apply it to what's happening with new parties that are particularly under research for the moment, and that may seem representative of other new parties on other new multi-layered settings, on other complex political systems. So we think that to some extent those cases could be, or at least could provide some insights from what could be happening in other cases that have not been studied yet. In terms of just to give you some hints of the evolution of the party, I will not stay long in this aspect of the evolution of the parties, their origins and the territorial adaptation, just to show you that both parties share some of the main characteristics of the genetic model. They don't have external sponsors. They both share charismatic leadership. Both Iglesias in Podemos and Rivera in Ciudadanos are considered by the academic and the political pundits in Spain as charismatic leaders. The main thing is that they have decided to grow, and their main strategy of growth has diverged in terms of penetration and diffusion in terms of pan-Iberico. So while Podemos has grown spectacularly in a very short period of time with no control, at least at the beginning, from the center, in Ciudadanos has been the opposite. Ciudadanos has tried to control from the center all the growth in the regions. So we have two kind of very different diffusion or growth, territorial growth differences here. The vertical integration and the autonomy of the regional branches is more or less shared by both parties. We can come to that if you have questions on the parties in the Q&A. And that was for the genetic model of the parties. But once the parties were built, they had to contest the elections. And what happened in the first regional elections that they were contesting, we see that they had their territorial growth strategies give them very different results in terms of territorial implantation. For example, for Ciudadanos, what we can see is that in some regions, actually in 5 regions, Ciudadanos didn't achieve its breakthrough. So he didn't enter the parliament, the regional parliament. So we can see that this may indeed be a problem in terms of the institutionalization of the party, because in some regions the party has no representation at all at the parliamentary level. In other regions, what we can see is that the party is supporting the regional government, while in others the party is not. And there's also some regions in which the party has a regional competitor that is sharing their political space, so they have to fight for the votes with other parties, and in other regions they don't. So that could be also a problem in terms of the evolution. And for Podemos, what we can see is that the party reached representation at all regions in Spain, and it also has some regions where it supports the regional government, so it has more influence than in others where it just has some relevance. And that's also relevant as well. The party not only has regional competitors, but also has opted to choose regional allies. For example, in Catalonia, for example, in Valencia, for example, in Galicia. Those are the more important ones, but also in the Balearic Islands, the party has some kind of alliance with a regionalist party. I would say a radical left regionalist party. So that also poses some questions about the institutionalization process that may follow. That's for the origins and the evolution, the territorial expansion of the parties. What's happening so far in the earliest institutionalization process? The institutionalization process usually takes a long time. We are just at the beginning of this process, but we can see something because we have data on each dimension. In terms of reification, we can see that mainly reification has been measured by the knowledge and the evaluations of the political leaders. Also for the party, but the party is well known in Spain, so basically we would find something like a flat line here. But the evaluation and the knowledge of the party leaders is, it may fluctuate. What we can see here is we don't have data that the black one is Podemos, the gray one is Ciudadanos, and that's knowledge, okay? And that's the share. We can see that in a very few months, the knowledge of at least Iglesias, we suppose that it's the same for Ciudadanos, but we don't have data available. We see that since the election and some 1 year later on, it was a spectacular growth in terms of people knowing who is the leader of the party. We can see as well that the evaluation of both party leaders has remained quite stable over time. That's the evaluation of the voters of the party that has also remained quite flat. Just to contrast that, at the regional level, we will see some evidences afterwards, but just to contrast that, we have data because Ciudadanos is a statewide party, but was for a long time focused at just one region, at Catalonia. We have data on the evolution of the knowledge and the evaluations of the party leader, in this case Rivera, in Catalonia. And we can see how much time it took for Rivera to rise his level of knowledge. And here we are not talking of months, we are talking of years, and we can see that Rivera's knowledge took almost 8 years to grow from 50% to somehow 80%. So here we can see that there's indeed a very big difference between the process of reification at the national level and at the regional level, at least for Ciudadanos. We have also data on regions. I don't know, in Switzerland, in Spain is quite difficult to gather because we don't have regional institutes devoted to make service just at the region. So having data on that is quite difficult. So we have limited evidences. We have here 5 regions, and they may not be representative of all Spanish regions. We've tried to gather data from quite representative regions for both parties, regions in which they fare well, in regions were not so important, and see what happens. And we can see that at least for the regional party leaders' knowledge, the evolution is not as fast as we've seen at the national level. We have data from 3 years now, and we see that the level of knowledge of the regional political leaders is not as high as Podemos and Ciudadanos national party leaders. They barely surpass the 60% level. And in some cases, depending if the leader has changed, for example in Extremadura, we can see that the level of knowledge of the new party leader is really low. So what we can find here is that there's a big difference between what's happening at the national and what's happening at the regional level. If we focus ourselves in terms of evaluations, not knowledge of the political leader, we can see that even at this level, the evaluations are always more or less flat, because it's the whole electorate that evaluates the party leader. In this case, the regional party leader. We can see that even in this case we can find differences, at least in Ciudadanos, from one region to the other ones. That's Catalonia, and if you remember that we have seen before, Catalonia is the region where the party fares better than the others. So why, if Ciudadanos has its better results in Catalonia, the party leader has the worst evaluation of all? Mainly because the party leader is the main leader of the opposition, and in Catalonia, as we have seen this morning, there's a growing polarization in the regional political system. So Ciudadanos appears to be somewhat punished for its position in the political debate. In terms of the evolution of Podemos, we can see that the evaluations are quite flat. There are a bit of differences, but not that much. So that's for the reification. In terms of the value infusion, we don't have many data on value infusion. Mostly value infusion has been measured by party identification, and we can see here is that the party identification, we are talking about the general electorate, has been decreasing in Podemos and has been slightly growing in Ciudadanos. The figures have been also very bad for the 2 main Spanish political parties, the PP and the PSOE, that have seen a really quite decrease in their figures of party identification. The thing is that Podemos started very well. It seemed that most people like the party and identified with the party, but then as the time goes by, the identification decreases. That is not the case in Ciudadanos, although there's some variations. Having data on party identification at the regional level is slightly more difficult than having evaluation of the party leaders. So far, I just could find data on Podemos, and because of Podemos contested the elections with other regional allies, we are able to track whether there have been some changes in the party identification from the people in the regions to Podemos or to its regional ally. So we can see here is that basically the most interesting case is the Catalan case, because the evaluation goes quite ahead with the party identification with Podemos, but at some point, here the evaluation decreases. That's because in Catalonia, the Podemos regional allies have decided to form a new party. So when you ask in the region, are you identified with Podemos? They say no, basically because they identify not with Podemos, but with the regional ally of Podemos. So you can see here that having alliances with other regional parties at the regional level also poses some questions about how the institutionalization process goes in one region or the other, depending on whether the party has allies or not. In terms of value fusion, there's also another relevant thing to take into account, and that's the relevance of both national party leaders. Why is that? Because if new parties have very strong party leaders, people feel attached to the party leader, not especially to the party. So having a very uncharismatic party leader may harm party identification in the long term. So that's what we are finding, at least at the national level so far. In the regional level, we've seen that this is not the case, but at least at the national level, this could be a problem. What we have tried to do here is to answer some questions like, is it plausible to find a replacement for the party leader? If tomorrow the party leader dies, what would happen? The party would sink and miserably fail, or the party would be able to find a replacement? I think that the answer is that there would be feasible replacement for the party leaders. Maybe not as well known as the main party leader, but it would do well. And another interesting indicator here is that at least in Podemos, not in Ciudadanos, because of this very centralized working of the party leader does not control all the regions. There are some political opponents of the Podemos party leader that are in charge of the different regions. So, although Iglesias is a very well-known politician, he does not control all the regions of the party. That's another interesting point. In terms of routinization, we have looked here basically at two kinds of data. The first one is what we could call routines in strict sensus. And to identify routines, what we have found is, has the party organized several assemblies in this short time alive? There's a striking difference here. Podemos is more mass-based or oriented party and tries to organize assemblies in order to select the party leader, and tries to do so regularly. We've seen that at least there's been a couple of assemblies since the origins of the party, but Ciudadanos doesn't organize assemblies, at least not to select the party leader, because the party leader, the regional party leader, is selected by the national party leader and the national party leadership. So there's big differences here in terms of routines. There are also some differences in terms of how many leaders have been replaced. We've seen that at least in some regions there's been some problems because the party leader has been replaced continuously in a very short span. That's another thing interesting. That's for routine. The other thing that we have been looking is authority enforcement. So when there's a conflict, what's happening? And what parties do, at least at the national and at the regional level. And we have discovered that both parties do have different conceptions of the enforcement and conflict solution. Podemos, there's also an interesting thing to say. Most of the authority enforcement has happened at the regional and not at the national level, so that's another interesting thing. So we can see here all these red lines are showing conflicts at the regional level. And we have seen is that, for example, Podemos, when there's a conflict between the national party leadership and the regional party leadership, what does is form an interim committee and then holds an assembly and selects a new leader. But what Ciudadanos does is basically it sanctions the party leader, it fires the regional party leader, and then selects or appoints a new one. So basically what we have is someone holding interim committees and the other ones basically sanctioning discrepancy. And this also has some effects in terms of the cohesion of the party, mainly because there's no democratic legitimation of the new authorities of the regional party leaders. What's happening in Ciudadanos is that every time the party, the regional party leader is sanctioned, there's a party split. The party leader leaves the party and tries to form a new one, at least at the regional level. So that's also some. It gives us some hints about the different processes of authority enforcement between the national and the national level. And at the end, we also have looked at autonomy, at what's happening in terms of autonomy, and finishing now. There's no relevant differences between the regional and national level in terms of links with external groups, mainly because what's the main strategy of both Podemos and Ciudadanos in terms of links with external groups is that they have opted for informal or personal relationship, not to build formal or statutory relationship with social groups or social movements. So that's something that we can see at both the national and the regional level. And in terms of party funding, there's also no big differences between both parties. Both are focused on getting public funding, so 80% of the campaigns and 80% of the public of the funding of the party comes from campaigning or departmentary groups. There's some differences between parties, but not differences between the national and the regional level. The main differences is that Podemos has no fees, so their members are not obliged to pay fees to become members, while this is the case in Ciudadanos. And instead of getting fees, what Podemos does is to institute a payroll system in the party, where some shares of the MPs goes to the some shares of the MPs payroll goes directly to the party. Ciudadanos relies more on membership fees and has tried to build a quite controversial system of transferring public resources to the public organization that has led to some controversies in the press. So there's a big difference between both of them, but not relevant at national and regional level. In terms of the discussion and the conclusions, I think we've seen the relevance of the origins of both parties and the multi-level territorial nature of the party, party system. In terms of the institutionalization, and we have tried to point out at least that there are some gaps between the national and the regional level in terms of their future evolution. This is true for the electrification, that is going faster at the national and slower at the regional level. We don't have that much data, but we see that there may be something as well in terms of pallium fusion, at least in Podemos. We've seen quite different procedures in terms of routines and authority enforcement in both parties as well. And autonomy is probably the dimension that has less differences between both parties at the national and the regional level. So at the end, what we can try to confirm is that there are multi-level divergences, and our expectation, our main original expectation can be confirmed. And I think that's it. Thank you very much for your attention. And I'm looking forward Maxime's comments.
Okay.
So, thank you very much, Oscar, for your presentation. And there are very many elements for debates. So it's time for discussion with remarks with
Yes.
Maxime. And you will make your remarks in French.
Yes, in French.
Oh, no problem.
It's okay for
Do
you.
you want to come here? Or?
Non, c'est
Oui.
pas
Okay. You can see.
Et ok, alors avant tout, merci beaucoup Oscar pour la présentation, aussi pour le papier. Je pense que tout à fait, il est très intéressant parce que justement, il a des ambitions très intéressantes de combler en effet une lacune entre, je dirais, trois types de littérature. Parce que d'une part, il y a la littérature sur les New Parties, après la littérature sur le Origins and the Institutionalization, et après le Territorial Party Politics. Et surtout, le papier est très riche, les sources utilisées sont très riches et très aussi variées. Mais après, je pense qu'on peut, si on va un peu plus en profondeur aussi, alors on peut identifier des lacunes. Donc j'espère que ces lacunes, ces remarques peuvent t'aider à améliorer le papier. Alors avant tout, je pense qu'il y a, surtout dans la partie disons, théorique, un petit peu encore de flou concernant la clarification des concepts. Par exemple, tout bêtement, ok, on parle de New Party, mais qu'est-ce que c'est un New Party? Parce que je pense que c'est important, pour cette littérature, il n'y a pas vraiment une définition acceptée par tout le monde, donc c'est bien de préciser tout ça. Et après, une autre chose que je n'ai pas remarqué lors de ta présentation, mais dans le texte, oui, parfois on utilise New Party et Mainstream Party de manière presque comme synonyme. Est-ce que c'est une chose voulue ou c'est une petite illustration? Et si oui, est-ce qu'on peut vraiment le considérer des synonymes ou pas? Est-ce que tous les New Parties sont des Mainstream Parties ou je sais pas? Ok. Après, moi je pense que ça vient aussi un petit peu de préciser encore mieux la manière de concevoir le processus d'institutionnalisation et ses liens avec le moment génétique. Parce que, ok, par exemple, si on prend, il y a plusieurs références à Panebianco, dans son modèle, il y a la genèse, après il y a l'institutionnalisation, donc d'une phase A, on passe à une phase B. C'est vraiment très mécanique, si on veut. Par contre, ici, est-ce qu'il y a cette logique ou plutôt on doit concevoir l'institutionnalisation comme un processus qui va, disons, intéresser la trajectoire du parti pendant toute sa vie? Et dans ce cas, ok, il y a les dimensions, disons, fast, slow, après institutionnalisation, mais est-ce qu'on peut aussi, on pourrait aussi imaginer d'identifier une dimension, je sais pas, strong ou weak, une chose, disons, un peu plus articuler un peu plus davantage ce processus. Et après, moi, je pense que aussi pour, disons, encore améliorer la synergie entre les trois littératures, ce serait bien aussi de, parce que toute la présentation, disons, du système multiniveau espagnol, mais après, on comprend, dans le texte de la présentation, c'est pas clair si ce système, disons, est caractérisé par exemple par des dynamiques de compétition symétriques, asymétriques, parce que ça, je pense que ça aiderait aussi à comprendre aussi les différences entre les régions. pas seulement entre le centre et les régions. Et après aussi, je pense qu'on pourrait, parce que Detterbeck, dans son analyse, dans son ouvrage de 2012, il y a justement cette dimension axée sur les compétitions politiques, mais d'autre part, il y a aussi toute l'analyse de la congruence verticale, l'intégration verticale de l'organisation. Et donc moi je pense qu'on pourrait insister davantage sur cette intégration verticale et peut-être aussi l'intégrer d'une certaine manière avec le schéma proposé du modèle génétique de Fanny-Bianc, parce qu'il y a certaines dimensions qui sont très proches, vertical integration, regional autonomy. Et à ce propos, moi je pense qu'on pourrait encore davantage insister sur la dimension territoriale de ce processus, par exemple, en précisant, parce qu'il y a le type de diffusion, il y a la pénétration et la diffusion territoriale, mais est-ce que ce processus, dans la construction du parti, de l'organisation partisane, a lieu au centre du système politique? Par exemple, si j'ai bien compris, ce n'est pas le cas de Ciudadanos. Donc, est-ce que c'est la même chose s'il y a une pénétration qui part du centre, du centre à la périphérie, ou est-ce que c'est différent si de la périphérie va au centre? Et après, lié à ça, parce que dans les buts aussi de ce mariage entre littérature, il y a aussi le fait d'analyser après les impacts de la genèse sur le processus. Mais moi, j'ai eu un peu de la peine après à saisir aussi dans les conclusions l'impact de ce moment clé après sur le processus. Ça. Et après, j'ai par contre d'autres remarques un peu plus ponctuelles concernant les dimensions. Concernant la réification, dans la partie théorique, on explique que ça concerne d'une part la connaissance du parti, la visibilité, après le fait de considérer le parti comme quelque chose de donné, quelque chose qui caractérise désormais le système politique. Cette deuxième dimension, je pense que c'est pas tout à fait encore mieux, on pourrait la mettre encore plus en lumière. Et après, je me demande si, parce que dans le texte, quand on considère la connaissance, la visibilité du parti, on donne beaucoup d'importance aux données liées aux social media et Twitter, Facebook, etc. Mais est-ce que ces données ne sont pas un petit peu biaisées? Parce qu'est-ce que ces données atteignent seulement un certain type de target de population, je crois, notamment les jeunes? Et donc, est-ce qu'on peut vraiment considérer seulement ces types de données? Et après, par contre, il y a toutes ces jolis graphiques. Peut-être ce serait bien d'utiliser des couleurs pour les rendre un peu plus... parce que parfois, on a un peu de la peine à distinguer les différentes lignes. Et est-ce que le fait de se focaliser sur le leader, et donc la connaissance et l'évaluation du leader, c'est vraiment un bon indicateur pour la réification, ou c'est plutôt un indicateur qui désigne une certaine personnalisation de ces deux parties? Après, pour ce qui concerne la value infusion, justement dans la partie théorique, on insiste sur le fait qu'il s'agit d'un processus de transition. Donc au début, il y a l'organisation est considérée comme un moyen, et après l'organisation est considérée comme un objectif en soi, mais normalement aussi dans pas les biens, aussi dans les autres auteurs, ces analyses sont axées sur les membres de l'organisation. Par contre, les graphiques proposés se focalisent sur les électeurs. Donc moi je pense que là ici, ce serait bien d'expliciter ce passage ou sinon de réfléchir à d'autres indicateurs, d'autres mesures pour essayer un peu de mettre, un peu de renforcer ou d'anticiper cette critique. Par contre, je pense que les données, l'analyse de la optimisation, c'est très, très intéressant. Par contre, je pense qu'ici, pour la rendre encore plus solide, on pourrait insister plus, je pense, sur les statuts, sur les documents officiaux des partis, parce que parfois il y a des références à la presse, mais voilà, c'est peut-être une source moins pertinente. Et au final, pour ce qui concerne l'autonomie, et là, moi je pense que au début, quand je connaissais disons, les travaux de Panegrampo, donc je connaissais sa définition de l'autonomie, mais si on veut aussi inciter, créer cette synergie entre plusieurs littératures, je pense qu'utiliser autonomie dans une dimension territoriale politique, c'est peut-être un peu risqué, ça risque de créer de confusion, avant tout. Et deuxièmement, on insiste beaucoup sur l'autonomie vis-à-vis disons, de la société civile au sens large, et de external sponsor, mais par contre, je pense que le fait de considérer la dépendance financière des ressources donc, de l'État, est-ce qu'il ne s'agit pas d'un autre type d'autonomie, disons si on veut, donc l'autonomie, peut-être réarticuler un peu la dimension, donc d'une part il y a la société, les acteurs de la société civile, mais d'autre part il y a toujours un peu à considérer l'autonomie vis-à-vis de l'État, ou après aussi l'articuler un peu plus, parce que est-ce que ces parties sont plutôt, disons, ces ressources arrivent du centre, arrivent des périphéries, des régions? Est-ce qu'il y a des différences? Est-ce qu'il y a des différents flux qu'on peut identifier? Et après j'avais encore une dernière remarque. Ah oui, concernant aussi justement les rapports entre les succès électoraux de ces partis et l'implication des succès sur les processus d'institutionnalisation. Je pense que là aussi, on pourrait encore disons, un peu plus insister sur ces liens, un peu plus expliciter ces relations, parce que je ne suis pas sûr que les succès, par exemple les succès dans certains cas, les succès au niveau national ont le même impact sur le processus que des succès, je sais pas, au niveau régional. Et si c'est le cas, est-ce que ces types de succès sont en lien encore une fois avec le moment génétique ou pas, je sais pas, avec le type de parti, si c'est plutôt en vocation régionale, régionaliste ou bien national, centraliste. Et oui, après une autre chose, parce que dans le modèle proposé plutôt par Bolélier, sauf erreur, il y avait aussi une dimension qu'elle fait un lien entre l'institutionnalisation et le fait aussi c'était lié à la renouvellement de l'élite partisane et aussi du leader. Donc est-ce qu'on pourrait aussi intégrer cette dimension dans le modèle ou c'est trop tôt pour le faire? Et après, juste une autre chose, aussi ça concerne à nouveau le discours que je vais faire avant, concernant la clarification conceptuelle du processus de institutionnalisation, parce que justement dans le texte, on insiste beaucoup sur la early institutionalization. Donc, est-ce qu'on doit aussi distinguer la dimension, disons, sur la longue période ou pas? Et après, une dernière question, sincèrement, je n'ai pas compris, c'est vraiment une question de curiosité et aussi compréhension. Pourquoi ce titre? Parce que je n'ai pas trouvé une réponse dans le texte. Merci beaucoup.
Alors, merci beaucoup Maxime pour ces remarques, pour cette lecture donc, approfondie du papier de Oscar. Oscar, I propose to take maybe 2 or 3 main remarks.
Yes.
Just to Maxime, just to open the debate.
Yes. Thank you very much for your really detailed comments, which is good because it shows that you have properly read the paper and you are interested in that, and you have I think that there are some remarks that are really worthy. We'll try to address the definition things, so new parties, mainstream. Mainstream, we basically try to oppose it to new parties, but there's no consensus on the literature. So there's new things, new parties, and all parties. We should call it all. We should call it mainstream. We should call it established. So there's no, at least as far as I know, there's no consensus on the literature on how to call it. So we try to use this difference between one and the other ones. I think that your point on the symmetries and asymmetries of the political system is worth exploring, and to at least to show or to give some hints to the reader about the differences that could be between regions. Maybe a paragraph should be enough to give that. Your idea on whether it's different, the presentation from the center to the periphery, from the periphery to the center I think it's interesting. I'm not sure. I think at the end it doesn't matter. The main, at least from Ciudadanos' experience, the important thing is that whoever is in control is really in control of the expansion of the party. Whether it's happening in the periphery or in the center of the political system, it's less relevant, I think. Because at the end, what's really important for the party is that the leadership is controlling or not controlling the expansion process. So, but I think it's worth giving a second thought on that. We don't have data on how to give on the reunification dimension, how to take a party as given. How can you measure that? It's not. I tried to look at the Spanish data, whether there were any kind of question that could somewhat be related to that, but I couldn't find it. So I don't know. Maybe in other countries you have some question like, I don't know, what would happen if this party would not be available for you? You would cry. You would. Would you notice that it's not? I don't know, something like that. But I doubt it. You have, and I'm finishing. You have a very good point on your comment on the value infusion. There's no data available. The value infusion is related to members, but we don't have data on internal surveys of the party. There's one survey, as far as I know, on Ciudadanos, but I'm not sure whether I can use this data, and we don't have data at all on Podemos. That would be the best thing would be to have data on members at the national and members at the regional level. But I don't know whether you have this kind of data in Switzerland. We don't have it in Spain, so that's quite a challenge, actually. And just to finish this, your idea on success and whether the success could be a spillover at the regional level or whether it's important, I think that's also something that it's worth thinking twice. It's a good idea, because we take it for granted that if there's success at the regional level because the party enters the parliament, that's something important, and maybe it's not that important. The important thing is that the party at the national level is really relevant because all the media attention is focused at the national level and not at the international level, and that can make something like or can make a more relevant impact on that. That's true. So I take your point. We will think on that and see what we can do. The title, just to finish. In a previous version of the paper, we tried to build. Let me see. I don't know whether you have some. Is there? No, I can see. Maybe there.
You can use the board.
Sure, because I'm not that modern. This one. That's a board. Oh.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
We don't have these things in Spain, so I don't actually know how to. Okay, thank you. Oh, that's even better. In a previous version of our paper, we thought that in this version, I've said that we could find conflicts between the national and the regional level in terms of of the dimensions of the institutionalization. Okay, ratification, autonomy, and so on. But if you think properly on the 4 dimensions, that's something that Nicole Boyer has started to do. I don't want to spoil his paper, so I'm not doing in the paper now. But if you think properly, the literature has not quite tackled the question that each dimension could be in a different way. So you could find conflicts in Randall-Lens-Bassan, I would say, Randall-Lens-Bassan dimensions. Is there conflict or is there not conflict? So are all the 4 dimensions aligned or are they conflicting somewhat? And if you do this, you can build a typology whether there's that would be how can I add that? Sorry, that would be the national, regional, and there's conflicts and no conflicts. So the best scenario for a party to develop is this one, because you don't have conflicts between the national and the regional level. All the dimensions go more or less ahead, and there's no conflict within each dimension of Randall-Lens-Bassan's typology. But the worst scenario for the party is this one, in which you have conflicts at the national and the regional, between the national and the regional level, and in each dimension things go really well. So you have that in the autonomy dimension you've done very well, but in the autonomy you've done fatal, and then at the national level, and that's where the title comes, because I call that scenario anarchy. So the road to perdition is are they going towards anarchy or are they going towards I would say, I don't know, heaven maybe. And that's the idea. Is the institutionalization affecting the life of the party or not? That's the main idea. So, but thank you for your comments. Yes, and I'm open to.
Si Maxime, tu veux relancer encore ou si.
Bon, oui.
Comme tu veux. Hein,
oui, non, parce qu'après, je pense que il y a aussi une autre dimension que peut-être n'a pas été. Peut-être, je pense qu'on pourrait encore l'analyser plus, parce qu'il y a, c'est assez clair, très clair, la dimension, disons, conflictuelle entre le centre et les régions. Mais après, les conflits entre les régions, ça, je pense, parce que ça, c'est, je pense, une des apports très intéressants d'Internet. Il souligne qu'il y a conflits verticaux, mais aussi au niveau horizontal. Et ça, je pense qu'il pourrait encore un peu plus être développé. Et après, la dernière chose, après je termine, j'ai oublié, je pense que aussi, surtout dans le texte, après dans la présentation c'est un peu plus développé, mais la justification des cas, la sélection des cas, peut-être c'est un peu trop synthétique. Parce que je pense que d'une part, on doit justifier les deux parties, le choix des deux parties, d'autre part, on doit aussi après préciser pour quelles raisons on étudie l'Espagne. Qu'est-ce que c'est un cas paradigmatique, je ne sais pas vous, mais qu'est-ce que ça veut dire ça? Pourquoi pas la Suisse?
Yes. Your point on the central periphery and especially the horizontal dimension is a very nice point. And I think we may be able to develop a bit more this horizontal conflict. This probably would mean another paper because but that's something worth keeping in mind. That's a very good idea. Yes, thank you. And we will work a bit more on the justification of the. I think it's easy to justify Spain because Spain has been one of the most studied cases in terms of territorial party politics. Why the parties? Well, because they are new. Why not Switzerland? Well, we could choose a comparison, but we haven't, because that's our methodological choice. No? So, yeah. Well, the thing with that is we are proposing a case study in order to inspire others to follow. So at the end, it's the main point of the paper is that we detect something that the literature hasn't said before. We propose our case in order to give room for others to follow and do the comparison. And I think that it would be very nice to have data from other countries, which is very difficult to find because you have to rely on very specialized sources, and it's not easy for a comparative, from a comparative point of view to do that. Yeah. Okay, thank you. More questions if you...
Alors, je sais pas si Johanna.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. I think it was very interesting, and maybe I should first of all say that I have not read the paper, so maybe my comments will be influenced by that. And second of all, I'm doing research on federalism, so I'm mostly interested in all this multi-level dynamics. And I think the paper makes a good contribution to that, which I will tell you in a minute. But before that, when you started the presentation, I was expecting some explanations for all these differences that you were presenting, and I was just wondering if you can explain a little bit why there are these differences between the two parties, and so just that we understand why you observe them. And maybe that's related to my second comment, because I think the paper makes a really good contribution to the literature on parties in federal states, and especially to the concept of vertical integration. Only you know about that. And in all the literature, the scholars assess whether parties are vertically integrated or not, mostly focusing on the system of parties in a given country. So I know in my home country, Germany, parties are vertically integrated. They are not so much in Switzerland. And if I'm not mistaken, in Spain there's a mixture. Some are integrated and some are not. And I think if you explain this process of institutionalization, the linkages between the two levels, you can explain how vertical integration comes about, and especially if you have two different parties that seem to get institutionalized in a different way, I think you can really make a nice comparison and explain why some parties are vertically integrated or not. Maybe emphasize this aspect more.
Yeah, that's a very nice point. And I think we could use it in order to justify, for example, the case selection. You see, there's because the literature on institutionalization has not properly addressed the multi-level problem. There's no dimension relating the vertical integration, and probably that. I think your point is that it should be maybe another dimension focusing on this vertical, because vertical integration at the end is a result. Yeah. So you could see that vertical integration is the institutionalization result in multi-level systems. So that's a very good point, actually.
Yeah, and you can explain how this.
And through this process, you can provide input on the outcome. Yeah, that's a very good idea. Yeah.
And maybe regarding the explanations of the differences, I don't know if you have.
We focus on those two parties mainly because there were others, but they disappeared. So the process of this institutionalization is not relevant. I think that what it's worth in terms of comparison is that their genetic models are different in terms of how they are built in their territorial growth, and that's the main difference. And I think that really has a very clear influence on the vertical integration dimension, because Ciudadanos has been built as a very centralized party from a top-down perspective, and the party leadership has tried to control systematically how the party has expanded, and as a result the party is very vertically integrated. But as we have also seen, that makes some problems in some regions, because the party has not even been able to reach breakthrough in some regions, because the control was so strict that they prefer to not be represented, that have a maverick party leader, regional party leader there. So that's the idea. In Podemos it's just the contrary, it's the opposite. They decided to let's see what happens, and afterwards they are trying to regain control. So basically what they are doing now is trying to gain control of all the rural regions that they weren't controlling at the beginning. So that has important effects in terms of vertical integration, because and there's also the question that the party decided to form alliances with other regional parties. So at the end, in terms of vertical integration, this is something also very important as well. So that makes I think that makes sense in terms of the comparison between them, and also in terms of on this vertical integration dimension that you thought. I think I should give you thanks. You should give me your name at the end and say thank you, because I think the idea of the Maxim, of course, you will also be in the comments. But this idea that in multi-level systems we have to think for a proper dimension able to give account of what's happening, instead of looking at the regional and national differences, that is also relevant as well. But looking at what's happening as a whole for the party once the process has finished, or the process is not finished yet, but it still has some form. That's something really relevant. Yes, it is.
And I think especially it's important in considering the federalization or decentralization of Spain, because this concept is always used in the literature on federalism as a mechanism that makes the federal system stable or strong. So I think you can also generalize from this to the Spanish multi-level system.
We've seen this in Catalonia, for example, and that was part of the discussion. I don't know whether I can't remember in the morning or during the meal, but the thing that Podemos has decided to form alliances, for example, with Ada Colau's party. That's I don't know how much familiar are you with Spanish and Catalan politics, but Podemos in Catalonia has reached an alliance with another regional party, and Podemos national party leadership is not controlling what this other party is saying. So in terms of what's happening in the party competition, but also in terms of the proposal from Catalonia to the rest of Spain, that makes something that makes sense. Okay, thank you. More, Oscar, please.
So I have some question about the relationship between the party institutionalization and leadership. So Maxime already underlined the point, the linking between reification and personalization. I think he's right in the sense when you focus on the personalization of the party, usually in the literature you focus at the same time the low institutionalization of the party and not the contrary. So I would like to know a little bit more about that, because you use if I well understood, because I didn't read the paper, sorry, but if I really understood, you personalize the reification dimension in party institutionalization with the degree of personalization in the attitude, the recognizing personalization of the party in the public attitude. So I think it's a little bit tricky, and not sure that it's completely agree with the mainstream theory or theories on party institutionalization. So what do you think about? And second, about the charismatic dimension of the leader. And the leadership, you distinguish here two parts. One is more with it is added by a charismatic leader, another no. So what about that? Because in the literature we have also some specific concern about charismatic leadership and party institutionalization. Somebody say, oh, with Pane Bianco say. The charismatic leadership is the opposite of party institutionalization, and other scholars say the contrary. So no, you can have a party institutionalization in a party headed by a charismatic leader, because the charismatic leader help to enhance the party success and the party durability over time. And so it creates also the condition in terms of values infusion and so and the durability of the party. So what about this point in your comparison? Because maybe I'm not well understood, but I think maybe it would be nice to think about this point in the discussion. So,
I think regarding your first point, that also Maxime pointed out before, I think in terms of reification, what we are measuring is whether the leader is well known or not. That doesn't exactly say something about charisma. It just because if you are if your party reaches some kind of electoral breakthrough at the national level, you probably get a knowledge share of around 80%, just because of media attention. Either you are very charismatic or you are not, but people know you because you are in the media. So you may be terrible as a party leader, but you are well known. So that's one thing. That could be reflected in terms of the evaluations, but the evaluations are really flat because it's the whole of the electorate. So I don't think for the reification dimension that measuring if the leader is known or not is really against the theory. But in the value infusion dimension, that could be a problem. But how can we measure charisma? It's because of the evaluations of the. Maybe we should focus on the evaluations of the voters of the party and see whether the voters really have a very strong commitment to the party leader, for example. We could try that, but I think I doubt we have results, because if we have a look at here, no, that's here. Those are, oh, sorry, yes, thank you. Yeah, that's data on Catalonia for Rivera. Okay, that's here. We have the evaluation of the electorate, and we can see that it's really flat. And that's the evaluation of the voters, of the party voters. And it's higher than the general electorate, it's also fluctuating. We can see that there's quite a gap between the evaluations of the voters and the evaluation of the electorate. So maybe that could mean that the party leader is quite charismatic, but I'm not sure of that. So how can we measure? Yes.
Yes, but my question is, I'm wondering if we, looking at these indicators, you really find what you want. My question is, why you don't consider the partisanization simply as a durability of electoral strength? For instance, in the text of Pedazur and Victa, 2002, institutionalization of extreme right-wing charismatic parties, they simply say, okay, if the party, if in a party you happen a long durability in terms of electoral strength, electoral support, so the party's the reification is done. So I think it's why you need public attitudes indicators for measuring partisanization. I'm not sure there's a good idea, no. And you risk a lot of criticism because you measure different aspects and it's a little bit complicated. There's a mixture of elements, and I'm really doubtful about it.
Yeah, we will do as the reviewer says, as always, of course. So if the reviewer says that that doesn't make any sense, we will, of course, delete all the data and proceed as, I don't know, through other means. I think the idea of trying to gather attitudinal data, it was basically because of Randall Bassan's framework.
Yes.
And I think they have some points there on the relevance of that. And also because providing attitudinal data, if you can have attitudinal data at the regional level, that's something that you can assess quantitatively. Because most of the other indicators are more or less qualitative, so that can give you something else, I would say, but I'm not sure. Yeah, I agree with you.
And the other point is, in dealing with the remark that we had before about the vertical integration, this is an internal dimension of the party, so it's an organizational dimension of the party institutionalization. So if you consider the electoral dimension, you can mix with the organizational one. I think when you look at the multi-level party organization linking or linkages, I think it's very important to have some, as you mentioned, of the assembly, number of assembly in the party. So you need some internal indicators. Very important, and I don't know if attitudinal, external attitudinal is very, very crucial for your own project working on multi-level party organization, and I think it's more important, my view, my feeling, that you need more about these internal indicators because of the institutionalization is focused on the internal linkages at the vertical and horizontal dimension. So you risk to work on two very, very broader dimension or very several aspects of partisanization, and you risk to go a little bit beyond your own main scope. But it's totally.
I see your point. I will think of that. I see your point. The idea, if I understood correctly, the idea would be to skip all the external dimensions and focus on the internal one and add the vertical integration as a new dimension. So we are actually improving the theory, and we also remain with this.
It's two papers.
Well, we could try to send it like this and see what happens.
Yes.
If the reviewer buys, then we have another paper. If not, then I think we should come to your way. Yeah, but that's I see your point, and your proper. Many papers on institutionalization actually choose, and they say we are going to analyze just these dimensions, not all of them, because actually properly analyzing all of them, it will take an amount of data and space that for a paper or for an article is probably not enough. So that's a justification to skip some of the dimensions as well. I will talk with Astrid and we discuss that. Because I kind of like this idea of focusing on the vertical integration and maybe providing more elements of what's happening with the relationship between with the central and the center and the periphery, and how do they manage when there are conflicts. We gather some data on that, so we could provide some evidence on this vertical integration dimension as well. So yeah, it's not. You'll see the results in in a few months, hopefully. And well, thank you. Are there other questions? I think it's fine, more than enough. I would say.
Je pense qu'on peut clore sur ce dernier échange entre les deux Oscars. Voilà. Et je tiens quand même à vous rappeler que le prochain rendez-vous de notre cycle de conférences, c'est donc jeudi prochain dans la même salle, ici, donc 22h30. Ce sera l'occasion donc de débattre, sur le populisme, à l'occasion de la parution d'un nouveau livre coédité entre autres par Oscar Mazzoleni, édité donc en livre qui vient de paraître chez Nomos Verlag, Politically Populism a Handbook. Donc on aura plusieurs invités, donc Oscar Barberà, Oscar Mazzoleni, Rainer Heinrich de Salzbourg et Hans-Georg Betz de Zurich. Donc rendez-vous jeudi prochain à 17h15 dans la même salle. Il y aura aussi ensuite un riche apéro offert par l'OVPR. Merci encore à vous toutes et tous.